The fourth day of the second, Ashes Test in 2025 delivered exactly what fans came to see: high pressure, cricket, emotional swings, and enough drama to make even the most casual viewer feel like they were witnessing history unfold. Australia and England have always produced compelling battles, but this match felt like it carried extra weight, with momentum in the series hanging by a thread. Day 4 began with tension already thick in the air, the kind you can practically taste, because everyone in the stadium and watching from home knew this day was going to tilt the test in one direction or the other. You could sense it from the players' body language. Nobody jogged onto the field. They marched, and from the opening overs, it was clear both teams understood the moment. Australia entered Day 4 with a job to finish. They had set up a strong position over the previous 3 days, thanks to disciplined bowling, gritty batting, and a home crowd that felt fired up enough to lift the entire XI on its shoulders. But England, despite trailing and taking body blows throughout the match, refused to go quietly. The beauty of Test cricket is how pressure transforms people, and England showed up knowing they still had a puncher's chance. At this point in the series, emotions between the sides were simmering. A few verbal exchanges earlier in the match had cracked the door open, and nobody expected the day to pass without sparks flying. But pure cricketing skill not. Trash talk ended up telling the story. The morning session kicked off with Australia needing breakthroughs, and they got right into England's batting lineup with ruthless precision. The Australian seamers were outrageous with the ball, hitting the perfect length repeatedly, as if someone had set invisible markers on the pitch for them to follow. The ball jagged just enough, swung just enough, and seemed just enough to keep England's batters guessing, and the first breakthrough felt inevitable. When it came, the stadium erupted like a popped soda bottle, all noise and fizz. The English batter who fell had looked solid up to that point, but one misjudgment, one moment of indecision, sent the ball clipping the outside edge and flying straight into the keeper's gloves. It was the kind of dismissal that makes you exhale if you're Australian, and mutter under your breath if you're English. England tried to rebuild, because that's what Test cricket forces you to do. But Australia refused to let the pressure drop for even a minute. Every over had intent. Every field placement had strategy dripping from it. You could tell Australia had spent hours analyzing matchups, tendencies and weaknesses, because everything about their approach felt targeted. Still, England mounted a small pushback. They stitched together a gritty partnership, the kind that doesn't necessarily scare the opposition, but does enough to make them uncomfortable. The runs didn't flow fast, but they came steadily enough to remind Australia that England weren't done. That resistance didn't last forever. Australia's next wicket came from an absolute seed of a delivery, one of those balls bowlers dream about and batters dread. It pitched in that awkward spot between back foot and front foot, swinging late like it had changed its mind halfway through the flight path. The English batter tried to adjust, but it was too late and the ball rocked the stumps. The bowler took off in celebration. Teammates chased after him, and the fans lost their minds. Australia had cracked the partnership, and you could feel the shift in energy, like the air itself had tilted in their favor. By the time lunch rolled around, England were hanging in there but clearly under strain. The commentators kept tossing around phrases like backs against the wall and must dig deep. And they weren't wrong. England needed someone to stand tall and take the game deep into the day, because Australia's lead loomed large. When play resumed, England looked determined, at least for a few overs. One batter even unleashed a couple of bold shots, maybe trying to flip momentum back or maybe just refusing to let Australia dictate the tempo. For a brief stretch, you could imagine England clawing their way into relevance, and then the collapse hit. It wasn't dramatic at first, just one wicket, then another, then a run-out that could only be described as a brain fade. Before England knew it, the scoreboard looked like a crime scene. The Australian bowlers were all over them, hunting in a pack, feeding off each other's confidence. What made it even more impressive was how Australia didn't rely on a single star to do the damage. Every bowler chipped in. Pace, bounce, cut, swing, they used the whole toolbox. England's lower order tried swinging for survival, hoping something would stick, but it didn't. Their final wickets fell in rapid succession, leaving the crowd buzzing. And Australia walked off knowing they were in total control of the match. When it was Australia's turn to bat again, The target was small enough that most fans assumed the chase would be straightforward, but big enough that England had a slim window to pull off something wild if they got early breakthroughs. And England sure tried. Their opening spell had bite, with the bowlers bending their backs, trying to extract whatever help the pitch still offered. The ball was carrying nicely, seams poking up like little knives, and for a moment it looked like England might make a game out of it. Australia shut that door fast. Their openers came out with confidence, rotating strike, punishing loose balls, and building a platform that immediately sucked the tension out of the situation. One batter played a gorgeous cover drive early in the innings, the kind of shot that sends a message loud and clear. "We've got this." England's bowlers kept pushing, but the Australians rode out the tough spells and cashed in on anything offline. Runs started piling up faster, and the crowd turned the stadium into a party. Once the partnership settled in, the chase felt almost too easy. England did pick up a wicket, giving their supporters a tiny flicker of hope, but it didn't change the trajectory. Australia kept chipping away at the target with calm professionalism. No unnecessary risks, no wild shots, just clinical batting. As they got closer to sealing the win, the noise in the stadium swelled. Every boundary came with a roar. Every single brought cheers. Even dot balls earned applause because fans could sense the victory getting closer. The moment Australia crossed the finish line was electric. Players hugged, high-fived, and shouted with relief and joy. England looked deflated, heads bowed, knowing they had let chances slip earlier in the match and paid the price for it. Day 4 ended with Australia celebrating not just a win, but a statement, a demonstration of why they remain one of the toughest teams to beat on home soil. The victory put them in a commanding position in the 2025 Ashes series and gave their supporters plenty to feel proud about. Looking back on the day, what stands out more than individual performances is the collective mindset Australia brought to the field. Everything felt aligned. The bowling plans, the batting discipline, the energy in the field. This wasn't just a good cricket team. This was a group playing like they understood the legacy of the Ashes and wanted to protect it at all costs. The bowlers were relentless, refusing to give England an inch. The batters were composed, rising to the occasion with focus and maturity. The captain's calls were sharp, smart, and perfectly timed. It was one of those days where every moving part clicked with precision. England, for their part, had moments where they looked competitive. A few batters showed grit, a few bowlers found rhythm, and there were flashes of resilience. But Test cricket is brutal, and patches of good play aren't enough. You need sessions, partnerships, breakthroughs, and consistency. England struggled with that on day 4. The pressure, the conditions, and the stakes all piled up, and the cracks eventually showed. Their collapse in the middle session became the turning point, a slide they couldn't recover from. Still, despite the tough loss, England will know the series isn't over. If anything, defeat like this can light a fire under a team. They'll pore over video, analyze every missed opportunity, tweak their strategies, and walk into the next test determined to swing momentum back their way. The Ashes has a way of bringing out the fight in players, even when they're down. No team wants to be remembered as the one that rolled over. England have talent, pride, and ambition, and they'll need all three to respond in the next match. For Australia, the win gives them momentum, confidence, and the luxury of playing from ahead. But they know better than anyone that the Ashes can flip in the span of a few sessions. They can't afford to relax. If anything, this victory sets the standard they'll want to maintain. The bowlers will look to replicate the control and aggression they showed on day 4. The batters will aim for the same calm, execution under pressure, and the team as a whole will want to keep the rivalry, energy alive without letting it distract from the cricket. As fans, this is exactly the kind of Test cricket we live for. Tense passages of play, gutsy performances, collapses and comebacks, gritty partnerships, clutch bowling spells, and a finish that felt decisive. Day 4 of the second test had all the ingredients of a classic, and it set the stage beautifully for the rest of the series. Whether you're Team Australia, Team England, or just someone who loves good old-fashioned cricket drama, this match delivered the goods. Walking away from the day, you're left thinking about how quickly the balance of a test match can swing, how small moments snowball into match-defining sequences, and how much emotion these games hold. Australia deserved the win. They earned it through discipline and fire, England will regret the chances they let slip, but will regroup swiftly. And the Ashes marches on, alive, intense, and as unpredictable as ever. In the end, Day 4 wasn't just about cricket. It was about resilience, pride, pressure, and the thrill of competition at the highest level. It was the kind of day that reminds you why the Ashes is one of the biggest rivalries in sports and why millions of fans around the world tune in for every ball. Australia walked off victorious. England walked off determined. And everyone watching walked away with the buzz that only a great test match can deliver. The second test is in the books. But the story of the 2025 Ashes series is just getting started. And if Day 4 was any indication, we're in for a wild ride.